For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want to give you a bizarre hypothetical scenario. This man right here is Christian McCaffrey. And I think we can all agree that he is the best running back in the NFL right now. It seems like it's McCaffrey, and then it's everyone else. There is a giant gap between number 1 and number 2. Everyone knows how important McCaffrey is to the San Francisco 49ers, and how integral he is to the success of the team. In 2023, he helped guide the 49ers to their 8th Super Bowl appearance in franchise history, after finishing the season with a league-leading 1,459 rushing yards, a league-leading 2,023 yards from scrimmage, and a league-leading 21 touchdowns. He finished 3rd in the MVP voting, 1st in the AP Offensive Player of the Year voting, and was named an AP First Team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler to go along with that. He was maybe the best player in football last season. But now, I want you to imagine that McCaffrey, after a dominant season, was unhappy with the 49ers, and thought that the team was underutilizing him and misusing him. Because now, I want you to imagine that Christian McCaffrey went into Kyle Shanahan's office and said, "I think you should change my position to tight end. I'm a better tight end than a running back. I want to play tight end, and I feel as though you're not utilizing my skill set properly." And this isn't a way to prevent him from getting injured, or a way to try and increase his career longevity or anything like that. This is a man genuinely believing that he should be a tight end, and that tight end was his natural position. Something like that would seem absolutely insane. Speaking of insane, it is insane that we are so close to 60,000 subscribers. So be sure to click that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single moment when we go live and when we post a video, as we're trying to build the best football community on the platform to talk all things NFL history all the time. Thanks in advance for your support. Well, as crazy as this scenario might sound, and even though we all know that the 49ers aren't changing McCaffrey's position to tight end anytime soon, I bring this up because during the 1973 offseason, when it came to this man right here, that's what he was desperately trying to beg the Dallas Cowboys to do. This is running back Calvin Hill, and not only was he an important part of the Cowboys and their offense, but he was one of the best running backs in the entire NFL. In fact, you could even make the argument at the time that he was the best running back in the entire NFL, or at the very least, the entire NFC. However, in the prime of his career, after an incredible season where he was setting the NFL on fire, he decided to tell the Cowboys to change his position, because in his mind now, he was a tight end. And you can imagine how the Cowboys reacted to that news, and what exactly they decided to do with that information. Because this is the story behind Calvin Hill, and what might just be, considering the circumstances, the strangest proposed position change in NFL history that you've probably never heard of. Before I talk about the proposed move in question, and how absurd it seemed on the surface, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Calvin Hill, was, and how good of a player he was for the Dallas Cowboys. In 1969, the Cowboys took a chance on Hill in the first round of the combined NFL-AFL draft, as they drafted the Yale man who led the Ivy League in just about every major statistical category, from rushing touchdowns, to receiving touchdowns, to total touchdowns, to yards from scrimmage, to points. You name it, Hill dominated the Ivy League at it. It was a bold choice for the Cowboys to take him, considering the fact that the Cowboys had the second best rushing offense in the NFL the year before, and running back Don Perkins was coming off of yet another Pro Bowl season. However, following Perkins announcing his retirement that summer, and a slew of injuries, Hill, who was supposed to be buried on the depth chart and was supposed to be nothing more than an afterthought as a rookie, despite his first-round status, became the starting running back, and proceeded to light the NFL on fire by making an immediate impact. In 1969, Hill started all but one game for the Cowboys at running back, and ended the season with 942 rushing yards, on 4.6 yards per carry and 8 rushing touchdowns, alongside nearly 1,200 yards from scrimmage. As a rookie, Hill finished second in the entire NFL in rushing yards, only behind Chicago Bears running back Gale Sayers, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And he finished inside the top 3 in rushing touchdowns and yards from scrimmage. For his efforts, Hill was not only named a Pro Bowler, and was not only named an AP First Team All-Pro, but he was also named the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, and amazingly enough, he actually got some votes for MVP. In 1970, he helped guide the Cowboys to their first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history, as they made it to Super Bowl V. And in 1971, thanks to 11 touchdowns, which was the third most in football, he helped the Cowboys win their first Super Bowl ever, as they won Super Bowl VI over the Miami Dolphins. Hill scored a critical touchdown for the Cowboys en route to their Super Bowl, scoring the opening touchdown of the 1971 NFC Championship against the San Francisco 49ers, which set the tone for the rest of the game. And in 1972, Hill was, once again, one of the top running backs in football, as during the 1972 campaign, a season where the Cowboys made it to the NFC Championship, he made it to the second Pro Bowl of his career by finding the end zone 9 times, by running for over 1,000 yards, and by recording 1,400 yards from scrimmage, which was the 4th most in the league. By this point, you know that Calvin Hill was good, but to give you some even more perspective about just how good he was, over those first 4 seasons, Hill had 3,958 yards from scrimmage and found the end zone 32 times. There were only 2 other players in the NFL to have over 3,900 yards from scrimmage and at least 32 touchdowns in that 4-year stretch. That's it. You had Cleveland Browns running back Leroy Kelly, who would make the Hall of Fame and would go down as one of the greatest runners of all time. You had New York Giants running back Ron Johnson. And you had none other than this man right here, Calvin Hill. When you're in an exclusive group of 3 players, and one of those 3 players is none other than Leroy Kelly, you are in a great spot, if I do say so myself. It was abundantly clear after 1972 that Calvin Hill was one of the best running backs in football, and was a force to be reckoned with on the offensive side of the ball. Which is why it came as a shock to just about everyone when, during the offseason, for whatever reason, this man right here, Calvin Hill, said that he wanted to have his position switched. And I don't mean a simple switch like running back to fullback or anything like that. I mean an all-out position change from running back to tight end, as in 2 vastly different positions with vastly different skill sets. Because after a 1972 season where Hill became, quite literally, the first player in franchise history to run for over 1,000 yards in a single season, Hill decided that this wasn't good enough, and that he would be better suited as a tight end. Said Hill about making the switch to tight end? I love it. Tight end is my natural position. Even when I was a quarterback in high school, I thought about it. I talked to pass offense coach Ray Renfro about it, and he feels I'm joking. But I'm serious about it. Look at our offense. It has so many dimensions. Then, look around at the basic offenses around the league and see how much the tight end does. And if you think that Hill was joking about this and making the switch to tight end, which obviously he's not, seeing as other people were commenting on this, as you'll find out shortly, he wasn't. Because that entire offseason was, for whatever reason, one giant press tour to try and convince the Cowboys to switch his position to tight end, a position that he deemed to be his natural position despite never playing it in high school or college or in any of his 4 years in the NFL. Said Hill a few weeks later, I started most of those rumors about possibly being moved to tight end. Tight end is probably my natural position, and with the injuries I had in my early pro career, I think the move might be beneficial. And a few weeks after that, in February of 1973, when Hill met with the press and found out that a reporter saw Tom Landry earlier in the day, Hill asked the reporter, "What did Landry say about me at tight end? We've got some backs who could take my place." Hill was incredibly persistent about this bizarre move, In fact, he was so persistent about this move that he endorsed the philosophy that if he told himself that he was a tight end, naturally, he would become a tight end. He was telling other players on the team that he was now a tight end, even telling his teammate, running back Mike Montgomery, that Montgomery was going to play more in 1973 because there was now an opening at running back following his position switch. Said Montgomery, "That's mostly Hill's idea. Coach Landry has not revealed any such plans." And understandably, head coach Tom Landry did not think it was a good idea to move one of the top running backs in football to a completely different position out of nowhere. Even though Hill wanted to play tight end because he felt as though he was better at tight end than running back, despite being pretty freaking good at running back, Landry was having none of that. I should note that Hill did work a bit at tight end during training camp in 1969, when the Cowboys were just trying to see where he would fit in, as they tried working him at just about every single position. Running back, linebacker, tight end, you name it, he played it, since they drafted him primarily as an athlete. However, by this point, it was extremely clear that Hill was a running back and not a tight end, despite having good hands out of the backfield and being a good catcher of the ball. He made the team in 1969 off of his running abilities, not his tight end abilities. Said Landry when asked about Hill wanting to change positions, "It's too early to say what changes will be made," which was basically the code that parents tell their kids when their kid asks for something outrageous and the parent says, "We'll see about that." Tom Landry took Calvin Hill's suggestion and put it right on the fridge for everyone to see. Spoiler alert, Hill did not get moved to tight end. He did not. When Landry was asked a few weeks later about the state of the team heading into training camp in 1973, Landry said, "At tight end, we feel we should be in pretty good shape." And not once did he mention Calvin Hill as being part of that group, because, well, duh. If you have the best square out there and you feel comfortable with how many circles you've got, you don't try to make that square become a circle. And astute and longtime watchers of the channel might remember that there was a running back a few years before Hill that did actually make the switch from running back to tight end. You might remember this man right here, a very good running back out of Texas A&M by the name of John David Crow, who played 11 seasons in the NFL, splitting his time between the Chicago and St. Louis Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. However, in 1968, the final season of his career, the 49ers decided to change Crow's position from that of a running back to that of a tight end, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Despite the fact that Crow started every game for the 49ers in 1967, averaged over 4 yards per carry with the team in 1967, and had 852 yards from scrimmage that year, which is pretty good, Crow's position changed to tight end. But that was a bit different than this. Number one, the 49ers had a brand new coaching staff, with Jack Christensen being replaced by Dick Nolan. So it was a new regime. And sometimes, new regimes try to tinker with things. Number two, John David Crow was 33 years old. So it's not as though he had much left in the tank when it came to running the ball. And number three, the 49ers had other options at running back while having no options at tight end. Their tight end situation was incredibly thin and tumultuous, as it was plagued with a combination of poor play and injuries. So it's not as though by changing Crow to tight end, the 49ers were stripping a strength away for no reason. That's extremely different from this man right here, Calvin Hill, where he was the top runner on the team, where the Cowboys had a quality tight end after using their first-round pick on Michigan State tight end Billy Joe Dupree, who would eventually make it to 3 Pro Bowls in his 11-year career, and where Hill was in the prime of his career, coming off of a 1,000-yard season. Hill might have been the best running back in football by this point. John David Crow, as solid as he was nowhere close to the best in 1967. So yes, Crow made the switch, but that's apples and oranges compared to Hill and what he was trying to do. As for the rest of Calvin Hill's career in the NFL, it will not come as a surprise to anyone that he did not play a lick of tight end. He played in the NFL all the way until 1981, with a brief hiatus in 1975 due to playing in the World Football League with the Hawaiians. And he ended his career as a 4-time Pro Bowler, making it to the All-Star Game in 1973 and 1974 as well, while posting over 1,100 rushing yards during that 1973 campaign. I think keeping the same position worked out pretty well for him that year. After Hill came back from the WFL, he played 2 seasons in Washington and 4 seasons in Cleveland, and only mustered up 2,576 yards from scrimmage across those 6 seasons, a far cry from what he was doing in Dallas. He sort of fell off after the WFL was done. But still, when all was said and done in his career, Hill ended it with over 6,000 rushing yards, nearly 3,000 receiving yards, 65 combined rushing and receiving touchdowns, and nearly 9,000 yards from scrimmage. For some perspective, when Hill's career ended, he ranked 21st in NFL history in yards from scrimmage, and is one of just 35 guys to score 65 or more touchdowns from scrimmage. So he definitely had a solid career in the NFL, and is remembered fondly to this day. But obviously, he's remembered as a running back, and definitely not as a tight end. And as a side note, regarding the man who primarily played for this team behind me right here, it feels as though Calvin Hill has been somewhat disregarded throughout NFL history, and is somewhat of an afterthought in the eyes of many, because he played for the team behind me right here, the Dallas Cowboys, and they have such a rich history at running back that it's very easy for a guy like Calvin Hill, as good as he was, to get lost in the shuffle historically speaking. They have 2 Hall of Fame running backs that played for the team and are regarded as maybe the best running backs of all time in Tony Dorsett and Emmitt Smith. The Cowboys also had Ezekiel Elliott on their team, and he was phenomenal when he came out as a rookie, and he led the league in rushing yards. You also had guys like DeMarco Murray who led the league in rushing yards. You had Herschel Walker, who was a phenomenal running back, great in college, great with the Cowboys, although many people were associating him with that trade with the Minnesota Vikings. And you have Don Perkins, who was maybe the first great runner in Cowboys history and was a staple of those teams in the 1960s. There are so many great runners on the Cowboys, historically speaking, that it's very easy to forget about a guy like Calvin Hill compared to if he were on a team where he would easily be the best or the second best running back in franchise history. But make no mistake about it, Calvin Hill was an awfully good player. So what's the lesson in all of this? I guess it's to know who you are and to know your strengths and weaknesses, if you want to call it that. If you are great at operating a certain piece of machinery to the point where you are considered an expert in the field, your company is likely not going to move you over to a different piece of machinery if there's no need for them to do so, and if doing so will reduce their overall output. If you are great at teaching the ancient history of Asian civilizations and have even published books on the matter, your university is likely not going to move you over to teach calculus if there's no need for them to do so, if they have no idea how good you'll be at teaching calculus because you've never taught calculus, and if doing so will hurt the reputation of the history department of the university. And if you're this man right here, and you think that your team is going to move you from running back to tight end for some bizarre reason, even though you're one of the best runners in football, odds are you're not going to get what you want. Because during the 1973 offseason, I think it's safe to say that this was too big of a hill for Calvin Hill to overcome. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.